if you're into it. We could go out and obtain some materials. Come round, we can borrow some stuff to get messy permanently. 'Cause real art is something you feel, and then real feelings inexcusable wealth, and you can't have it. Not on my watch. 'Cause real art is...
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to the Marketing Matinee. My name is Michael John Oliver from MJO Creative. And over the next hour, we'll be looking at some of the big issues shaping the wonderful world of marketing. Shortly, we'll be talking about how to fix a bloated website with Tom Garfield from web design agency Brand New Notebook. Later on, I have issues. I do indeed. I have issues with Sue Fisher from Lost at Sea Marketing and Alice Widger from Milk It Digital. And we absolutely need to talk. And remember, this is an interactive show, so please leave your comments in the chat box, in the comment box, and don't forget to do the very, very digital thing and like and share the show. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, house lights out, and let's begin. Yes, and as an old saying, isn't there, in the world of marketing, and I'm sure all marketers have heard this at one point or the other, and it goes a little something like this: less is more. So when it comes to websites, why do so many businesses seemingly ignore this advice? And more to the point, why do we marketers indulge this? Why do we? There are a plethora of B2B companies out there carrying big, bloated websites that are barely updated, barely loved. Is it time that we marketers practiced what we preached? Shortly, I spoke with Tom Garfield, who is the MD at digital agency Brand New Notebook, about the biggest mistakes B2B firms make with their websites and how they can avoid that dreaded website bloat. Hello, Tom. Welcome along to the Marketing Matinee.
Hello.
It's good to have you along. Tom, you have been in the website game for a while now, but I think with anything to do with B2B, the past 12 to 18 months have been a funny one, to put it to put it in kind of not too patronizing tones, but it has been a tough year, and it's kind of like anything that can go wrong kind of has gone wrong for so many businesses. But for the website building game, how has the last year and a half been for you?
We've been kind of busy, actually. I've not had, touch wood, I've not had any real significant downtime, which is really great. It's obviously not the same for everyone in the market at the moment. I think websites, there's always projects. We don't have like a particular industry. There are always kind of projects to be doing. It's quite hard to find good developers as well. There are some brilliant developers, but there are a lot of ones who maybe aren't so great as well. So touch wood, we've fortunately been busy, but I have seen, especially I think in writing, in other general marketing, there is a slowing down. But at the same time, I am very constantly kind of like making sure I'm networking, putting myself out there, getting my kind of work shown to as many people as possible through social, etc. So I think we're lucky that we've kind of been doing that. I'm from a marketing background as well, not just a development background. So I'm lucky, I guess, fortunate to have that experience too.
Has it been sort of a mixture of established businesses, or have you noticed a pickup of new businesses in the last little while too, have been reaching out to you?
Do you know, mostly it's if I think back to the projects that we've had, it's existing businesses who've got a website, they've got something that they maybe put together a number of years ago, it's all right, it's served a purpose, and they have identified this need to like we need to up our game because the market's a bit lower. We previously, maybe there was like this referral source that dried up, or there was some just nice, easy flow of clients or projects or business that was coming through to them, and they didn't really need to market themselves. And so they kind of just let this old nothing-y website just sit there, years old. And then they think, actually, no, we need to do something properly about this.
So what have businesses been prioritizing? Because that's interesting in and of itself, because you think the story goes that when times get tough, marketing is sort of the first thing to fall by the wayside. Yeah. But it sounds to me that a lot of businesses are, while some are zigging, they're zagging in your direction. So what are the kind of things they are prioritizing when they speak to you? So
a lot of the businesses that I've been working with have been steady. I've worked with a few healthcare companies. We've got people who are in construction, and those industries seem to be doing okay. I think obviously they're kind of like core necessary industries, so they're doing all right. I've worked with quite a few freelancers who are copywriters or people who are independent consultants in some way that are looking to kind of up their perception. So it's like we're doing okay, I'm doing all right, I've been finding some work here and there, but actually what I really need to do is get myself into a position where I look like the kind of sophisticated, I guess, marketer, consultant, freelancer that is going to be chosen above competitors, because I think that's where they're seeing the kind of where they're sort of letting themselves down a little bit at the moment, is they don't look as good as they are. And that can be really powerful. If they're losing projects, or if they're not getting traffic to their site, if they're not getting the people to actually make the inquiries, because they've just kind of got this site that's a bit like meh. If people are going to be like land on the site and have 100 different people that they could potentially work with, you want to be the one that stands out and makes that person go, "Oh, that's a nice site, isn't it?" Even just that thought process, it doesn't even have to be read in great depth or even be something that's all singing or dancing, but if you can just get someone to say, ooh, that can make the world a difference.
Absolutely. And full disclosure, I am one of those freelancers. I will say now, we will get the plugs in quick and early because you deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. One of the things that really drew me to you and to Brand New Notebook was it was literally like I think one of your clients posted a case study on LinkedIn. I went, well, it's good. I was in the market for a new website anyway, and I went and looked at it. And what sort of struck me straight away was, and this I think is perhaps your calling card, it was just one page, but my God, did that page have impact? It was beautiful to look at, beautiful to to use and to scroll. But it got the job done. It wasn't bloated. It wasn't all things to all people. That sort of strikes me as being one of the things that a lot of businesses don't really appreciate when it comes time to building a website. They don't need a website that has everything. Is that something you really champion?
Yeah, very much. There's sometimes focus on the wrong thing. They think they've got to build out this massive beast of a site. Again, it all depends on what kind of business you are. If you've got a very functional website that needs some sort of transaction, some sort of ordering system, that's a completely different world. But if you're a solo business that offers a service that's bespoke in some way, and you're essentially using your website as a way to market yourself and generate inquiries and leads, then very often we focus on the wrong things. What I think we look at is things like, a big about page with all about me, and this is how I do. But the real kind of the thing that I think is so important is the initial impression. So what does it feel like to browse your site? How much of an impact can you make in that immediately in that first few seconds? And how clearly can you get people to feel a great deal of reassurance that you are going to be an excellent provider of the service that they need, rather than like impressing people too much, which is important. You want to like impress people, but then you've got to back it up with this really, really core, like, this is what I do, this is how I work, this is the process we might do together, these are some people that have said great things. And if you're just a solo consultant / service provider, you just really need to lay that out as clearly and as interestingly as possible, really.
Is that something a lot of people just overlook and think, hey, if my website just looks good, if it's, that kind of the perception, like it just needs to quote unquote look good, that will do most of the heavy lifting. And not even the UX, just the the copywriting aspect of it is so important. Is that something
Yeah.
you find that people kind of don't
Oh, yeah.
pay as much attention to as they should?
Yeah, we're always pushing our clients. So they'll come to us for a design project. We'll say, yep, design development, no problem. What's your content plan? And they go, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know. We'll bodge together some stuff. Nah, it's not going to work. I can create you a beautiful site that's going to look great, that's going to feel really nice to browse, etc., etc. But if that'll get them in, that'll get them to stick around for a few seconds to be like, oh yeah, this is nice. And when you start reading it, very quickly it's going to turn them off if the copy's no good. So you have to have both. You have to give both equal attention, and you have to design them together. You can't design a nothing message. You have to have that really, like with your content that you wrote, was so cool because it inspired my design in a big way. So the baffling buzzwords bit that's on your site, I felt that kind of like, how would that be visually sort of baffling? And so I did this thing where it sort of starts overlapped, so you can't read it, and then as you scroll, it sort of clears up and it's like baffling buzzwords. So like that, really, really important to kind of make sure that you've got your core message. If you can get it down on a document and you read it and you're like, yeah, that's compelling, that's when it's ready to go to design, not sort of before that.
Absolutely. You and I are on the same page when it comes to that. It's content first before we start talking about design. That's always been like a core tenet, I think, of any good piece of marketing. Just IMO. I think that's
I think it's true. There is a simplification though. So there is an oversimplification, I think, where it's sort of content then design. There is this iterative bit as part of that process that doesn't have to be finished content, finished design. You can have content, design ideas, content version 2, and they can feed off each other during that process. I might come up with something that's a suggestion that will inspire you to rewrite a thing or shorten something or change the order of something. So yeah, that's very, very much like an iterative process throughout that bit too, but always first draft of content first.
Absolutely. Creativity it's such an important part of, I think, what you stand for, and certainly what makes I think a good website stand out. And you mentioned on to use my website as an example that I use the phrase baffling buzzwords, and the phrase is kind of like, it's baffling, it's kind of muddled up together, and then as you scroll down it reveals itself, and the idea being that ultimately we're looking for clarity among all the noise. And there are a lot of websites out there that do indulge in that kind of clever design work and aspects that look kind of exciting and fun to play with, but can be quite distracting. How do you strike the balance between something that just looks cool and something that's really more of a nuisance for the user experience?
Yeah, that's really important. Something I'm really, really cautious of is exactly what you've just described. If something is flashy and show-offy for the sake of it, I think you can feel that. And if it gets in the way of reading, or if it gets in the way of your experience, then it's not a good idea. So one of the other bits on your site is you've got these 3 testimonials, and they start in the middle and they all expand outwards. Now I had to really tinker with that bit to make sure that as you were scrolling, not just on desktop but also tablet and mobile, as you were scrolling there was no overlap that was uncomfortable for people. So you had to be able to sort of feel like as you were scrolling that one testimonial appears, the other one's overlapped, but you're not ready to read those yet, and then you scroll more, and just at the right moment they separate from each other as you're looking to read it. It would be very easy for me to accidentally get that wrong, and people would be like, I can't read it because there's one on top of the other and it's not in the right place, and there's clunky aspects like that. So making sure that every piece of flair, I guess, every little creative touch has a purpose, doesn't get in the way of the user experience, actually has to add to the user experience, has to enhance it in some way. And if it doesn't do that, if it's just, oh look, that moved, get rid of it. There's no point. And you see that on agency websites. It's almost like this kind of like they're building the websites for each other rather than their customers. They're sort of like, look how flashy we can do it. And they all go on this kind of huge campaign of like trying to outdo each other, I guess, with flashy animations and crazy dev work.
Yeah, I think it raises a really interesting point as well, that a lot of people think of a website, they have this kind of vision in mind, but that vision is often on a desktop. They don't consider that it also has to work on smaller devices as well. How hard is that? Or do you find that, has the technology or the programming language you use, we'll get to that in a second, has evolved that there to the point where actually it's not as much of a headache as it once was? Or are there times where you make something that looks great on desktop, but you just cannot get that to work on mobile? How is that playing out?
Yeah, there are lots of times when that's the case, and that's why it depends on the business. So some businesses will have a lot of mobile traffic, and that's often like B2C, or you'll get a certain industry that's much more mobile dependent. So it's important to have a little look and at least understand, if you haven't got access to analytics, do your best guessing and kind of think, what kind of audience am I serving here? Are they likely to be on desktop, mobile? And from there you can prioritize. So if you think a large portion of your audience, your visitors are going to be on desktop, then you can maybe make some decisions that would be a little bit sort of more acceptable on desktop, and you have to make some compromise on mobile. Or if it's the other way around, then you do the other way around. But now, I mean, responsive design is really the difference between having something at a fixed width, so a number of pixels. This is the width no matter what device it's on. So if you looked at it on a mobile, it'd be this long, and if you looked at it on desktop, it'd be this long. Whereas we now use units that are flexible. So that means things like percentages. So it's a certain percentage of the entire screen size, or you can use VH and VW units, which are basically like the viewport height and viewport width. So for example, if something is like 80% of the viewport width, it means it will always be 80% of the size of the width of the screen. And that can mean things can change and adapt as you make things bigger and smaller. But the most important thing is to, like, very often I'll screw myself over because I'll design something and I'll be like, yeah, that's brilliant, it looks great, and it works really well on desktop. And then I'll come to like the mobile and I'll go, yeah, I've got no idea how I'm going to build this in mobile. It does not work at all. So you can either go back to drawing board and just start again, which is really important because you can just leave it clunky. You can read it or you can see it. It doesn't feel as nice. It doesn't feel bit professional. It's a little bit of a workaround that's not quite useful to the user. So I either go back to drawing board or I will just create a different way of doing it that's just better on mobile. And things like attention to detail, like the font size, kind of bringing that down to an appropriate size for mobile, not just letting a heading be massive, and then you get like word breaks and stuff on different lines and stuff. So yeah, I really, really care about the attention to detail on mobile.
Now, this is going to be a very kind of nerdy, devy kind of question, but I'm fascinated by this. You use WordPress, you build on WordPress. Why that platform? What is it about WordPress that you enjoy using?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it's the thing that I learned first, but it just so happens to be the by far the largest content management platform used by most development professionals. It's something in the region of like 90%. I can't remember exact stats, but it's a lot. It's like 90% of websites are WordPress. If I always break the different platforms out into different people, it's appropriate for different people. So you've got like the visual, really kind of make it as easy as possible platforms like Squarespace, Wix. They are meant for people who are either DIY, so you haven't got a budget to do a professional one. You don't need a professional one because it's maybe like a hobby business or just a sort of fairly simple, straightforward site with just very basic stuff that you need, and they're brilliant for those businesses. But you can't achieve certain functionality that you can in WordPress. So there are a lot of limitations that you have to accept if you're going to use something like Squarespace or Wix. And you can't. There are opportunities that maybe you can't take advantage of with something like that. So, for example, if you want to have something a little bit more bespoke in terms of the style, the animation to really stand out, sometimes there are limitations there. If you want certain functionality like integrations with maybe like a CRM or a platform that you use a lot, to automate stuff, or if you've got a particular, let's say you've got like a podcast and a blog and a resources hub that you want, and you want like the thumbnails of each of those things to be different. You want to be able to categorize them in different ways and display them in different places. There are some limitations again on those platforms. So WordPress is essentially a tool for professional developers. It's not really meant for people who are not professional developers or designers. So the people that get frustrated with WordPress are probably because they're using a tool that isn't meant for them, and that's fine. But if you're building on WordPress and if you're building out a site, it involves a lot of, like, you have to do a lot to it, but what you can get out of it is just so much more. And then there are newer things like Webflow and Framer, and those are great again for designers, but they're not predominantly geared towards like development as such. They do offer obviously development, but WordPress is the only one that sort of I mean, there are others, and obviously you can do lots of things outside of other things that aren't WordPress in many ways, but WordPress is the one that kind of has the most existing like plugins and existing bits that you can do with it to get the best out of it at the budget that most small businesses have.
You mentioned the plugins. Well, one of the I think enduring criticisms of WordPress is that it can become very plugin heavy, and it almost becomes a job in and of itself to keep it up to date and to maintain it. If you are someone who is you're comfortable enough to do that, but someone who can find it a little bit overwhelming, or even just someone who doesn't remember to do it as often as they should, what's the best way to stay on top of a WordPress site and make sure that it does stay up to code?
Well, the first thing to do is be very careful about which plugins you use, because WordPress is an open source platform. You can add whatever plugin you like in, and they're not all the same. Some of them are very, very, very well made, and they're made by big kind of companies or great developers, whatever. But there are also these like tiny little things that can easily break your site if they're not updated properly. So my first rule is, if I don't have to use a plugin, I won't. So that's for things, there are some really, really basic functions and this is where like the professional developer bit comes in. If you're not a developer and you're trying to use WordPress and you're building your own website, you'll probably end up adding a bunch of plugins because there's stuff you don't know how to write, and that's fine. That's, you can add a bunch of stuff, but the more plugins you add, the more risk there is of some security flaw or some functionality breaking when something's updated. So all these different plugins do lots of different things, and they all have to in some way interact with each other. One sits on a page, the page gets updated, and then that isn't compatible with the plugin because the plugin hasn't been updated, and so you end up with this breaking down of like functionality. Some stuff stops working, and if you're not a developer, you don't know how to fix it because you're like, I don't know, I just plugged it in, turned it on, and now I don't know why it's not working. So there is a problem there. So you either have to be really, really plugin light and therefore just reduce the risk and make sure that you use the bare minimum plugins, but then there's a potentially downside in that you haven't got the features that you want. Or you have a developer on site that is there to maintain and host the website. And you can get, hosting and maintenance plans with people like me who will just make sure that the site is always up to date. They'll check the plugins, update them, review the site, make sure nothing's broken. If anything is broken, it's usually an easy fix for a professional, and then they just tweak it and do it. And, so if you have got a WordPress website and you're scared of it, then bringing a developer on board to just like look after it is probably going to be a really wise investment.
And just before we wrap up, and if you're someone who's been watching or listening to this podcast and you think, I like the cut of this guy's jib, I want to know more about Brand New Notebook, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, I suppose I should say our website, right? So brandnewnotebook.co.uk is our website. We've got a Calendly call you can book on, or you can email us, have a look at our work on there. I'm just about to add another bunch of case studies as well, which includes your site. So that'll be on there. Hopefully, I'll probably get that done sooner rather than later, actually. So that'll be on by the time people watch this.
brandnewnotebook.co.uk. Tom Garfield, thank you very much for your time on the Marketing Matinee.
Thank you.
Tom Garfield from Brand New Notebook. And remember, if you have any thoughts or questions on the show as we go, please drop them into the comments. And from websites to SEO, LinkedIn, Cringe, and so much more. It's that time on the Marketing Matinee for a wee panel show we like to call We Need to Talk. And joining me on the panel this week is Alice Widger from Milk It Digital and Sue Fisher from Lost at Sea Marketing, because we have issues and we absolutely need to talk. And it's our time on the Marketing Matinee where we have issues and we absolutely 100% need to talk. And joining me on the We Need to Talk panel this week from Lost at Sea Marketing, Sue Fisher. Hello, Sue.
Hi.
And from Milk It Digital, the wonderful Alice Widger. Hello, Alice.
We need to talk.
Hello.
Making her stream debut, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah. It's my first time listening to Terry.
I promise you, like this will be over in a flash. It will be fun. It will be frantic. It will be good because on this part of the show we have issues and we absolutely need to talk. And I can't think of two better people to kind of kick off this section with, because we live in a time now, don't we? We live in a time where digital words are kind of thrown around willy-nilly, kind of with almost reckless abandon. If there is one term that just happens to be kind of thrown around to mean a good deal of anything, it's AI. Everything is AI. I kind of get the feeling we'll talk about the use of AI the same way people in the late 90s talked about like the World Wide Web or, cyber surfing. And we'll kind of be like, oh, that's so cute and quaint. But it is the color du jour at the moment. And I read a LinkedIn post just very recently that said one of the biggest issues we have with SEO in particular is that, with SEO and with search engines like Google delivering AI generated results, is that the bulk of the material it's going to be sourcing those results from are going to be AI generated themselves. So this becomes delivery platform for largely unremarkable, unoriginal content, regurgitating this kind of AI generated gruel. And so, Alice, I think this is the perfect question to kind of toss to you. The idea that it's been well entrenched for years that there's a certain amount of things you need to do in order to demonstrate best practice from an SEO point of view. But then along comes big bad AI to kind of potentially scupper it. What sort of things should brands and marketers in general be thinking about when they're thinking about the so-called coming of AI to search?
You need to talk.
So do you know what? Like you said, it is a really big topic at the moment. And you're the second person to ask me in the last 7 days about it. The first person was on LinkedIn and they tagged me in a post, and it was basically Gartner had released like this insane sort of percentage of kind of like data and content that will basically be AI generated, and it was like a huge amount. And it was like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was really, really, really high. I think what's really important to remember is like, this is like worst case scenario. It's like, we are not there yet. We're not even close to it. If you've looked at AI content, if you looked at, chat GPT, the content is so thin. It is so generic. It's so beige. It's so boring. If I have to read one more piece of content that says, in this digital age, or something along those lines, I'm going to scream. You can spot it from a mile off now. It's like AI imagery, it's all those different things. The other thing to remember is that Google is actually really cracking down on it. So we've just had a whole load of algorithm updates to combat spammy AI content on websites, and a lot of websites actually got taken off search, got unindexed because they had filled their websites with really bad quality content. So that is one side of it. So it still remains true that when it comes to content, we should be producing pieces of work which actually talk to your ideal client, your ideal audience, actually provides something useful. It's hitting their pain points, it's hitting all the things that they need, and then what you do to fix that need, whether it's as a service, if it's a product, e-commerce especially, really, really has to work on their content. It's such a competitive market, so you need to be really, really on it in e-commerce. I think the other thing to remember as well is you probably saw the headlines where Google was coming up with suggestions on various topics, like, how many rocks to eat, and various other things which were incredibly questionable when I was testing it out. Again, these things are very much in the testing phase. It is not there yet. It still requires a lot of work. I think people are also smart enough to realize that obviously we don't eat one rock a day to maintain ideal health. It's, people are questioning AI content, as they should be. We're not at the point yet where all content on the internet is going to be, AI produced. it is very much a tool. It's very much a tool to help us in our jobs. But, first and foremost, I always say to anyone who asks me about it is by all means use it as a guide. By all means use it to, have your thoughts in order, thinking about, sort of how to piece out your content and things like that. But don't do a copy and paste. It's like if it gets indexed, it's not going to rank. If it gets indexed, no one's really going to read it. It's not actually going to do anything. So always rewrite it.
It's the thing, isn't it, Sue? Because we have always, I think ever since AI content kind of came to the fore, it's the idea that, yes, by all means, it can make things faster. It can make that first draft appear out of nowhere. But the tenets of good content and the tenets of what is effective marketing have remained consistent. And if anything, AI has brought that into sharp relief. What is good is being, given more prestige, given more precedent. Even the idea that AI is going to have an impact on search engine optimization doesn't mean that all the good stuff that goes into producing quality content is now suddenly gone by the wayside.
Agree. And I think it's really interesting because when you were talking about the SEO there, Alice, I was thinking back to my first job, which was purely SEO. And it was around the time where keyword stuffing was a really bad thing. And I remember, and it's the same advice today, which is you write your website for people, don't write it for Google. And it is the same with AI. It's like AI can help you draft something. It might give you some ideas for blog, but your writing should be for people. If you're writing for robots, it's not going to attract people. And I think it's such a simple fact that almost gets lost amongst all the technological advances. Write content that's good, that's funny, that appeals, that interests, inspires.
It's true though, isn't it, Alice? If someone comes to you and says, how do I rank on Google? What do I need? What keywords do I need to do? What links do I need to be doing? Fundamentally, there are a lot of things you can do to kind of tweak the edges, but it just comes back to the core tenets of just doing good stuff, doesn't it?
Exactly. I always say to people, it's like ultimately people, Google wants to give people a good time. Like that is it. It wants to give people a good time. So if your website gives them that good time, in terms of its content, the way it's been built, the structure, how easy it is to use, that's giving people a good time. Search engines exist for people.
Yeah.
That is what they are for. They were built for people to use to find the thing they need. Give them what you need. It's like, it's not rocket science. It's not dark arts. It's not it's like, yeah, it takes time. Yes, it takes a lot of data analysis and figuring out, how you can talk to your audience and who they are, what they need and all those things. But ultimately, give them what they need. It's right there. Give it.
It's all about user experience. And I think with AI as well, because I think perhaps I'm wrong here. I notice a lot of people seem to be doing quite identikit websites at the moment, and that falls into that. It's like you're not getting a good UX. You haven't thought about who your customers are. And I always say to people, with your content, your brand, everything, does it pass the caveman test? Is it obvious what you do in the first couple of seconds? Because if it doesn't, if it's just identikit, don't copy other people, be unique, be yourself, find your own voice. And I think that sort of goes in with AI. It's great for giving you ideas. And I'll hold my hand up and say, I quite often write my own content and then I'll sort of pop it in something and say, can you correct the grammar on this? Because I am crap at using commas and shit in the right places. So I will 100% rely on it to do my dirty work. But I think it should be for the dirty work. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like there was that great meme going around, and it was I paraphrase it, but it was I don't want AI to do the creative work for me. I want it to do the boring work. I want it to do
I want it to do the bitch work.
Yeah, it's like we should be. Yeah, exactly. We do the fun stuff, the greater stuff. AI does the boring. The grammar, if we don't like it.
All of these points that I will definitely get wrong. And that's the thing. It's like, so I can write, and the one thing is at the moment, I'm finding quite a lot of joy in writing my own stuff because there is so much identikit crap going around. I feel like I'm always rediscovering my voice because you stand out more. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. There's always that backlash, isn't it? And I thought, so many creative people say, or have been told, AI is coming to replace you, but with everything moving one way, zigging one way, there is going to be that massive push of people who will zag. And there's going to be that, to think of a really crude example, if we're talking about, things like cafes, and the advent of kind of like, vegan alternative cafes. There's always a market for people who want things that are different. And if the norm is going to be AI generated content, there's going to be a large market of people who are like, actually, I want human beings to make the stuff that I consume. I want to work with an agency that is, has actual people doing the hard work, and there will be a movement towards that. So there's always kind of a give and take. It's just interesting how this has rejuvenated the push for authenticity, and I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a really positive thing. I think there are so many people now that perhaps felt a little bit shy before and pushing their voices for. And I don't like the term thought leadership because it feels a bit wanky to me. But I'm going to use it. The kind of thought leadership opportunities is showing your voice, who you stand for, what value adds. That's something, particularly on LinkedIn, I am really seeing a few voices stand out who are doing this really, really well. I think because there's such a sea, particularly in LinkedIn, of what is obviously AI content. And I'm sorry, guys, you're not fooling anyone. It's the freaking rocket emoji and other such things. I think it's pretty easy to spot, right?
Absolutely. Alice, so we have issues and we absolutely need to talk. And speaking of LinkedIn, absolutely the most cursed website. Is it the most cursed website? It's certainly 100% on the podium for being a cursed website. But here's the thing I'm really sort of fascinated about. And I don't think it's something that we in the LinkedIn sphere talk about enough. And it's just how fundamentally boring LinkedIn as a website is. And I spent the weekend kind of thinking about how boring it is and why it is that I'm almost on LinkedIn in spite of myself. I'm there kind of like out of necessity. I need to be there because that's where my potential audience is going to be. But is it going to be the social media site I go to if I'm browsing around, I'm bored? Is it going to have that same kind of pull as something like Reddit or Twitter before it became the most cursed website of all time? Is there a reason? There's a reason why when people who aren't on LinkedIn make fun of it, that feeling kind of holds up. Are we there because we have to be there? Or is there genuine joy to be found being on a website like LinkedIn? How do you both find it?
I think there is definite joy, but a huge caveat here. So I was trying it for a while, off and on, very inconsistent posting strategy. I didn't get a lot of likes or anything going on. So I was just kind of umming, and I was basically trying to make all of these posts, try to sound intelligent and probably regurgitating the same information that is said absolutely everywhere. And then I had a chat with Rowena, who works in wildlife marketing, who is ace, by the way. We started to talk about things, and her biggest advice to me was stop trying to be someone else. Who you are is great. Who you are is perfectly valid. And I worked out that when I stopped trying to sound intelligent, actually what I was posting was fun and it seemed to have more value. So I do post videos and I am quite irreverent on them, maybe foolish, but they do break things down. I try and make things clear for people because I think in marketing, there are so many buzzwords, analogies. There's a lot of shysters in the industry. I'm sorry, but there are. And so I think people try and make themselves try and sound better by kind of blinding people with acronyms. And I want to break that down a bit because we don't need to blind people with acronyms. So I'm finding quite a lot of fun in just making it more accessible and bringing the joy back into it.
No. Yeah.
Alice, how do you find it?
Do you know what? I've got a soft spot for LinkedIn. I've had a LinkedIn for donkey's years, and I literally had it set up for jobs. It was like a job site, like pretty much originally. I can't remember when I started it, but it's a long time. And it gathered dust for a long time. And I started using it and I realized that I have way more fun on LinkedIn than I do Instagram. Like my Instagram personality, I may sound a bit weird, but my Instagram personality seems to be a lot more professional than my LinkedIn, even though my client base is all on LinkedIn. I should probably be more professional and serious and, SEO expert. But I have a lot more fun on LinkedIn than I do Instagram, which I find quite interesting. I didn't expect it to go that way. I'm a lot more sweary, one thing. But I try to, much like Stu, I try to sort of, not do something different, but there's a lot of SEOs out there. There's a lot of SEO people talking about lots of different technical things you can do. There's amazing people who do it, and that can feel very, very overwhelming, and it can feel a bit like, where the fuck do you start? What do I do? Where do you even start with SEO? And that's what I try and break down, is like, it's not this big scary thing. It is another form of marketing. It's all part of the marketing cog, and they all relate to each other. And just trying to start people off, just the basic things of, do you even have a Google search console, and do you know what it is? Do you know what it does? And here's some easy tips and easy wins you can get from using it. Just trying to get people into it without feeling totally overwhelmed and just scared, basically, because it's not scary. SEO is awesome. That's why I do it. I promise it is awesome. But yeah.
Sorry, Alice. I was going to ask, do either of you have like a split between the number of people you follow on LinkedIn who are based in the UK versus, say, based in the US?
I have most of them I follow on the UK, just because I don't think, things in the US is different. We've got different kind of content. I'm creating different things. The trends in the US are different. The audiences are different. And the honest truth is, most of my clients are in the UK. So although I might be a bit silly, and I do have a lot of fun on LinkedIn, I also want to bear in mind who I am, who my potential audience is, and what of their problems I solve. And the people whose problems I solve are in the UK generally.
The reason I bring it up is mainly because I used to work for an American company. And so a lot of my followers and contacts are based in the US. And it's interesting that during UK work hours, there's the UK LinkedIn, which I think is becoming a lot more friendly. It started off being a little bit stilted, a little bit kind of corporate, but it's starting to find personality, and not in a I'm doing my work laugh personality, but genuine and real, and you can feel like that sense of authenticity kind of really coming through. American LinkedIn kicks in, just after lunch, but usually it's when I log into LinkedIn in the evening. That's when American LinkedIn is on. And holy shit, it's like attending the world's most boring conference. It's like everyone is on stage, everyone's on a panel, and everyone is being very good corporate citizens because we have a duty to perform and be professional. And it's like, it's the tale of two cities. I can't believe it. Actually, no, I can believe it, because there is that kind of like, got to be a good company guy.
That's a cultural split. Whereas Americans, I'm being horribly generalized here, but Americans are sort of more kind of keen on the polished, perfect image. Whereas, we've got more of the British humor of warts and all. And I think, saying that with LinkedIn, I think actually you've mentioned authenticity, and it's such a buzzword at the moment, but it's so true, that being yourself. And Alice, I think you said about you're happy to swear and sort of be more lighthearted. I think that's a really good thing, us being ourselves on LinkedIn, because my customers are not just buying what I do. A lot of people do the same things that I do. They're buying into me. They're buying into the fact that I'm really passionate about what I do. Yes, I have all of that experience, etc. But at the end of the day, I'm what sells my business. So it's that authenticity, that differentiator. That's what makes you, what starts to make your brand.
I do wonder if there's if something to be said for the way that solo entrepreneurs like us use LinkedIn, and people who do work for companies, and companies who see LinkedIn as kind of like an extension of their office space, and that there's an etiquette and a behavior that's expected of employees, which people like us who are beholden to ourselves can get away with. I mean, we can kick around and swear and have a good old time, but someone who's got a performance review coming up might not be so keen on being so cavalier.
Branding element too, and I think there are sort of a lot of companies who are a bit anxious about personal branding, whereas the pendulum seems to have swung now that the companies have realized personal branding is a good thing. I mean, obviously they can't go along and start slagging their company off, but I think even then, people working for a company, if posts are under their own name and things, and if they're being professional, I think they can still have some fun. But it's an evolving thing, really, this personal branding. I think people haven't bought into it until quite recently, particularly big companies. There's been a bit of wariness about making them look bad, etc. So I think it will change. I really think in the next sort of 12 months, we'll probably see more and more people actively encouraged to get more active. But I mean, who knows? They're saying that.
I think the more that authenticity kind of comes in, and we're talking about like a genuine push for real personality. I think, when we're talking about the land of algorithms and everything, we will see LinkedIn privileging that kind of content more, and perhaps the kind of stilted start shirts and it's time for corporate time. Let us discuss corporate related issues might fall a little bit further by the wayside. Just quickly, while I've got you both, Alice and Sue, we have issues and we absolutely need to talk. And this is an issue that I have to admit, it's something I've thought about, but I only really, I have to admit, think about sort of in the abstract. And it's the idea of age discrimination being a factor in marketing. And this is a topic that our mutual acquaintance, one Rowena Wilding, kind of brought up, which I thought was really interesting. And it's the idea that marketing is, for all intents and purposes, and I mean it in sort of like the wider sense, so incorporating things that people like me and Sue do, as well as the sort of the adjacent specialist areas like SEO that Alice covers. It's a young person's game. And that the idea that if you are over the age of, say, 45, good luck. Marketing does not have a place for you unless you are an established consultant or a C-level kind of person. Good luck getting a job in marketing, because this is a young person's game. And I just can't help but wonder, is that true? And if so, what kind of questions should we be asking of marketing teams when they start looking at themselves and saying, are we just a little bit too young for this?
So I think it's definitely, age definitely comes into it, and also obviously gender does as well. But, from a personal point of view, and I am in a lot of, it's difficult if you're employed, because I'm not employed anymore, and I haven't been employed for nearly 10 years. But from sort of a freelance point of view, I do see a lot of talk from other people marketing sort of within our age group. So I'm 44. I've got 2 young children. And seeing people in my sort of age group talking about how they didn't get a gig, they didn't get a job, they didn't get a contract because someone younger came in. And with that comes obviously price. Younger, inexperienced, they can pay less because they think, especially in terms of things like social media, they think it's easy, it's just posting, it's just taking some photos. There's not a lot in it. But with age comes obviously a lot of experience and knowing, and it's that age-old thing, literally, of, when you've done a job, you have so much experience behind you that you can do it quickly, but you can do it quickly because you have put the time in, you've put the training, the learning, the testing, knowing what works, what doesn't. And I'm not saying you shouldn't hire younger people, but you don't suddenly sort of reach a hill and go, oh, okay, right, that's it. Everything you've learned is suddenly out the window, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks and other sort of sayings that I can pull out of the hat. But definitely, I think it is definitely a thing. I think, especially being a woman as well. I mean, not just marketing, but across the board, you get to a certain age and it's like, oh, you're going to go off and have kids. Or
I would agree there. But I remember being asked that in my 20s. So when I was, I think I was very young and I was going for a job interview. I remember the CEO asking me, I'm not allowed to say this, but you're not going to go off and have babies anytime soon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's, it's just absolutely right. And even though it isn't illegal, you can't ask it.
I know.
As if, men somehow are part of the baby making process.
It's just crazy. But it's kind of mentioned social, because I've found that a lot, because obviously it's an area I work in quite a lot. And funnily enough, I've taken on social media sometimes from people who've had in someone cheaper and younger without the experience, but who haven't understood that social media shouldn't operate as a silo. If your social media is being, or just post some pretty pictures and some bits and have nothing behind it, then that's not going to succeed. Your social media is like the window to your brand. So that is how you have a conversation with your potential customers, and you're potentially putting this in the most inexperienced person you know. And that is no disrespect to people who are young and eager to learn, but it takes a lot of time to think about, okay, this is how customers react, put a plan, put what your conversation, your pillars of truth, how these fit into your social media, but also be doing the analytical work, monitoring this, looking at this, what works, what doesn't, engaging with that client base. And it's just nonsense to say someone can't learn. We've been learning throughout our careers. It's not like if we get to 40, we'll suddenly say, oh, "Oh, my brain's full." You know, so
That's wonderful.
It is the other thing as well is that one of they say the key tenets of marketing is that you should learn more about your customers, speak to your customers, learn what they're about, and there's that kind of crude example that the people who are more likely to buy products, or at least have the ability to sign off on spending, and speaking broadly in a B2B context, are people who are of a certain age. Like the idea that we need to understand what was going through the minds of Gen Z. We need to get Gen Zers to do Gen Z marketing when the person who's going to be doing the buying is someone who is of that demographic, that age demographic that we dare not speak of because they are post 40. It's a sort of a lack of appreciation just fundamentally for the people who actually buy things. And if we are who are we producing content for? Are we doing this to satisfy kind of like our own status? Are we doing marketing to impress other marketers? Or are we actually doing it to kind of entice people to buy things, which isn't that the point?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think there's such a lot with marketing. It's really interesting because it tends to be a lot of people see different aspects of marketing a bit like islands. It's like, oh, your SEO island, your social media island, your email marketing island, but they should all have that's why the strategy is so important. They should all have this overarching vision. You know, it's like I said about James Bond. It's like, how are you going to defeat the villain? That's what your strategy needs to be. So all of these things are tools in defeating the supervillain. I don't know why I've gone on to James Bond again. I'm sorry. I'm really obsessed this week.
There are far worse things, and I think it's insane to me. It's insane to me that there's so many marketers, particularly marketers who should know better, who parrot the sort of ageist perspective, and then kind of like say one thing and then do another, and then wonder, well, hang on a second, why are we alienating such a large chunk of our customers? It's baffling to me.
Even if your marketing person was targeting someone younger, it doesn't mean they can't because they're older. I mean, it's ludicrous. You're saying someone young we can only speak to people our own age, our exact same demographic. You know, there's plenty of different demographics to me. It's just all about the targeting. So it's like you either understand marketing and the fundamentals of customer personas, understand your audience, etc., or you don't. But I actually think it does come back a bit to the fact that there are so many people. We're such an unregulated industry. There are a lot of people and actually even agencies offering really bad services. And Alice, it's a particular problem in SEO. The amount of times you get this, I'll get you number one on Google. It's like, what? Obviously you won't.
And we seem to have had a slight hiccup with that interview. If you listen back on demand, we will have that sorted. But Alice Widger and Sue Fisher on the We Need to Talk panel. And that about wraps it up for us in this episode of the Marketing Matinee. Remember, you can follow the show on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. Just search for Marketing Matinee. And if you're a business looking for marketing that isn't stuffed with baffling buzzwords, then come talk to me at MJO Creative, where we provide marvelous marketing for fabulous firms. Find out more at www.mjocreative.co.uk. From me, MJO, from Alice Widger, Sue Fisher, and Tom Garfield, thank you very much for tuning in. And curtains up, curtains down, that's the show. See you next time.